Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage AFA's Vice Chairman of the Board for Field Operations, Dave Deach.
You can imagine how excited I was when I found out that I was going to be the first person on the stage after the Chief's address. But as a guy who spent almost 27 years in the aircraft maintenance and logistics business, I was privileged to work with literally thousands of phenomenal enlisted airmen and NCOs. And it's my privilege today to introduce the man who's responsible to the Chief and the Secretary for the leadership, morale, welfare, and utilization of that great group of people. Please help me welcome to the stage the 17th Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Chief Jim Cody.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Thank you. Appreciate it. So as tough as that might have been to follow the Chief, I really have to follow the Chief, which is always my favorite part of AFA Orlando, because it always lines up like this, despite our best efforts to say, I need a day later, I need a whole day, but that doesn't work out. But it was good that we had some great folks up here that you could all recognize to give me a little bit of break and space on that. You could dry your eyes, and the Chief always does a great job of inspiring, I think, all of us to just be better at everything, not just who we are. So lots happened since we were here a year ago, as you kind of always try to kind of bring you back up to it and reset with the group that's here today. And, I would think likely one of the most significant things that we have all contended with is the fact that we had to go through force management, and the end result of that is we are the smallest United States Air Force since 1947. And that's significant and can't be lost on any of us. And really, in that time that we have now become the smallest, we are still globally engaged at unprecedented levels, and there has been truly no appreciable reduction in the demand signal for airmen or air power anywhere. Yet the men and women that serve continue to step up and move forward. I'm sorry, Secretary, I didn't acknowledge you. Thanks for being here. I didn't see you there right away. I know you were talking with the Chief a minute. Appreciate your steadfast continued leadership of support of our airmen and their families. It's important that everybody understand just what General Welch talked about, and I know the Secretary will talk about it tomorrow, about how there is a strategic vision for the future of our Air Force and making some very difficult choices today to ensure that we have what we need, so we're not just having that, car that is faster than everybody else's car. You have to have the right people in that car, right? So that's the piece that I kind of want to talk a little bit about as we continue to move forward. I'll kind of give you a little snapshot update of where we are. So you could think, based on what I kind of described in the onset here, that could have the tendency to paralyze the force, right? So much pushing back on you, so many things that would just seem to be tearing at any type of ability to kind of continue to move forward, specifically when you talk about people type of things. That could happen, but it hasn't happened, and that hasn't happened because of the leadership in our Air Force and because of the great airmen. So we continue to evolve our enlisted professional military education. I'm very excited about it. We have completely done it with our Senior NCO Academy. It's a blended approach. It's a higher level of learning, and the feedback we're getting, while extremely challenging for the men and women that are going through it for it, they absolutely come out of that saying, hey, I am better prepared to be a leader. I am absolutely there. It is challenging, but engaging. We're in the process of doing that with our NCO Academy, and the 2 beta tests that we've done with that to make sure we have that curriculum set right is really producing solid feedback and going in the right direction. We instituted about 9 months ago now the Airman Comprehensive Assessment, the new feedback form for all airmen. I think that is a powerful thing, and how we're redefining how we have these meaningful and purposeful conversations with our airmen. Making sure that it's more about that conversation, that relationship, than just getting some words on a piece of paper. But really having that kind of common dialogue where at the end of that there should be a common understanding of what expectations are, where we all see things, and how we're going to work as a team, supervisor and raidee, to accomplish goals and to reach full potential. And that will lead directly into what we've already started, and that is the significant changes that really span, updates all the way back to the inception of our enlisted evaluation system and our weighted airman promotion system for the enlisted force. Really excited about it. I think we had the euphoric stage last year when we were talking about it because people realized we're going to do it. Now we're in that anxiety stage, severe anxiety in some cases, because we're getting after a lot of things that our airmen have been asking for, and that creates some uncertainty of where do they fall, because they knew where they fell before, where everybody else fell. Now people are going to kind of fall in a little bit different order. But nonetheless important. I'm very excited about how we've been going. We're getting ready right now to start our 4th round of developmental special duty nomination and selection. That process is absolutely working well for our Air Force. That doesn't mean that we executed perfectly with the 1st round or the 2nd round or even the 3rd round. What we have done is just what we said we would do. We would go through the execution, we would take the feedback, and we would make adjustments. What has worked is the basic premise and concept behind it, and we've stuck with that. That is a process by which our chain of command nominate their best qualified people to do these duties at the right time in their careers. And we've opened that up to every career field. So really, the feedback is great. I tell you a little story about this and just how powerful this is and this significant change. So in this new process, the first hurdle we had to overcome is everybody was upset that we weren't taking volunteers anymore, right? Well, to be honest with you, and I always like to make this point and emphasize it, everybody is a volunteer. Right? All volunteer force, nobody's hoodwinked at night. You don't wake up at basic training and what the heck happened here. You might feel that way the next morning, but you actually showed up and asked to be here. But this idea that we had volunteerism within a volunteer force, sure, that existed. And I think what we have to look at today in our Air Force, being the smallest Air Force we are, and when you think about a human capital strategy with that small force, you have to be very deliberate about everything with everybody. Because you just don't have the size of force to make a lot of mistakes and not have it have huge impact to the right. And there were good examples of that really led us and kind of became the burning platform to say, hey, we got to kind of move and evolve forward with how we select folks to do these, at least these 10 very important special duties that have the impact on the entire force. They touch our entire force. And what we learned along the way as we went through this is you're not always the best judge of how good you'll be at something, right? You might have a good indication, but most of what you think about yourself is what you want to do, not necessarily maybe what you would be good at. But part of what we do as leadership in our Air Force, part of what our commanders do, is they do discern amongst our people and look for potential and have this ability to understand what the enterprise needs and when you're ready to go meet that need. So this is Sergeant Joe Anderson. He's a first sergeant out at Dias in the maintenance squadron out there. He was selected under DSD. Did not volunteer beyond the fact that he volunteered with his recruiter and went to the MAPE station. Never thought about this. He never thought about doing anything but, his AFSC. But he went down there with the right attitude because the chain of command picked the right person to go down there. He stepped up. He said, hey, my Air Force needs me to do this. I'm going to give it my best shot. He goes down there. He's a distinguished graduate at the First Sergeant Academy. He's also the Commandant Award winner. And now this is what he'll tell you. What Joe will tell you today is he says this has changed his life because he saw the Air Force from that stovepipe in which we built him. And now he sees our Air Force in a much different light. That is creating a future leader that is going to be able to do all those things that General Welsh talked about in his presentation and we need into the future. So I'm really, really excited about how we're moving forward. We also have to continue to develop that team, right? As we really rely on industry, and I appreciate their continued support and partnership with our Air Force, it's absolutely essential for us getting it right into the future and having those things that our would-be adversaries are clearly going after just as we are. But we have to make sure we're developing our team to be able to leverage that technology because having the stuff isn't enough. That's still what gives us the distinct advantage in the United States Air Force and our military over any other country today. It's the team that we have that they don't have. So you have to consistently look to develop that team. I'm really excited to say if you look at that spinning pyramid, I like to talk about that a lot. It goes to how we're considering development in this whole pyramid concept, not in this triangle you kind of climb up to that peak of. And we currently have about 18% of our career fields that are doing developmental teams on the enlisted side of the house. By the end of FY16 or calendar year 16, every of our 133 core career fields will have developmental teams. And part of doing that is they're assessing their career paths the whole way. What do you need to get to the top of that pyramid, wherever you may be traveling around that pyramid? And how do we ensure that at the right times in your career, we're developing the right amount of people to be able to do that, and making that very transparent to our airmen so they can see how they're going to get there. So I'm really, really excited about that, and that ties right into one of Secretary James's initiatives that we're working, and how we're going to create the career path tool, how we're going to evolve that tool for all of our airmen to be able to look in, see what a career looks like, and there could be on and off ramps to that career, as well as leveraging it as a mentoring tool, where our airmen can get in there and they can not just have those people that are directly in their chain of command that they might be familiar with, but also themselves reach out to other people that they would like to be mentored by potentially, and also give people that can mentor outside of their functional communities. So it all goes to how you look at that. How do we develop the team? How do we help the team reach their full potential, and how are we very thoughtful about that? You can't just hope that people have what they need to have to get where you need them to get, unless you have a plan to get everybody there. And the first part of that is developing some of those key milestones. So I believe we're doing that. I'm really proud to say up there in the top left of that screen, that's Chief Master Sergeant Danny Doucette. And so while we are doing this on our largest scale in our Air Force right now, when you think about one Air Force, the 3 uniform wearing components and our civilian component, really holistically looking at that. So I talked a little bit about the First Sergeant Academy with Joe, but this is Chief Master Sergeant Danny Doucette, and he's the first Air National Guard Chief Commandant of our Air Force First Sergeant Academy. First ever. And what I'm most excited about in that is not that, hey, we picked a Guard Airman to be the Commandant because he's an Airman. We were going to pick an Airman, and that's good enough, right? What I'm excited about is really the First Sergeant Academy has been on the leading edge of all of this approach to how do we look at the entire Air Force, all components, and how are we developing the whole force. So when it comes to these key leadership positions, we can have representation from every component operate at that level, and they have the prerequisite requirements. They have the credibility that comes with experience and training to take on those roles, and it's not, it's time for somebody in the Air National Guard to have that role. There is no better chief in our United States Air Force today better suited to be the Commandant of the First Sergeant Academy than Chief Doucette. And that's exactly where we have to continue to develop the entire Air Force to get there. I'm working with Chief Kursky and Chief Hotaling right now. We are actually looking holistically at all of our enlisted force, all components, on how do we make sure we're developing the entire force to be able to integrate throughout the entire force versus having these parallel things that don't really mesh when we need them to mesh from a developmental standpoint. How do we acknowledge that while we are very comfortable on the active duty side of the house, how we build everything, right? We've thought this out, we'll evolve it, but we're very comfortable with it. But we have this great skill set within our reserve component airmen that we somehow don't backward engineer into what does that mean in military speak. You can go out there and you can take every bit of your military experience and translate that to a civilian equivalency. We've done that. But we have not had that same look and looked at all of our civilian experience and made an equivalent comparison to what would that mean to us in the military. How would we say that that is a comparable amount of experience, a comparable amount of training, and capture that, and then understand that at all levels of our Air Force? Then when we're making these decisions about airmen in the future, we're valuing them in the way that we truly should be valuing them. You have to do it both ways. So we're working that really hard right now to make sure we have kind of laid out what do we need airmen to have, and then as you kind of back that out, you'll develop all the airmen in the right way. And I want to make a point of emphasis on that because part of the discussion we've had with our reserve component airmen at different levels is there is a contingent of our airmen that want to be that traditional citizen airman. They're perfectly happy they're going to come into a unit in a state, they're going to get that, and they're going to do that for a lifetime. They have another career, they're in for their, 1 week in a month, their annual tour, and they'll respond when the nation calls. That's important that you don't jeopardize that in this idea of how do you develop the force. But it's also important to understand that there's a large contingent of airmen in the reserve component that do want this ability to progress and do not want to be capped by the fact that the person that they came in at the same time they did has to leave for them to progress. So how do you create a development pyramid for them, and where's their on-ramp to that decision? Okay, I'm willing to move states. I'm willing to change career fields. I'm willing to do this, and how do we capture that? And that's what we're working real hard with our reserve component enlisted leadership to develop that and can kind of build on the force. So really excited about how you develop the team. But, you also, when you think about the team, you have to think about where our strength comes, that core. How do you strengthen that? And I'll be honest with you, I got a couple pictures up there of Mrs. Welsh and Athena and the boss and I. And, first and foremost, I can't thank them enough. For they continually travel with us to all these different places. We run them pretty hard. And they reach out to all of our airmen and their families. They work with all these agencies, as well as Mr. Beatty, the Secretary's husband. They get together and try to collaborate with all these plethora of agencies out there that are willing to support and help our airmen and their families. But there's a lot of disconnect there, and it's sometimes very difficult to connect them all together, as well as bring those families together as a core within our military family, within our own tight-knit community, so they can draw strength on each other. And they're doing really some yeoman's work in those areas. But there's also other things that we're doing. We have a single airman initiative, and this is a great story that Staff Sergeant Hadea Star Eagle. We were at Scott just a month and a half ago, and we're up, we do an all-call. It's always a pleasure to do that, and then we hang out just to thank our airmen, shake their hand. And Hadea, got in line, and she came up, and I tell you what, it's always very rewarding and uplifting for us to be able to do that. But she kind of came up, and her attitude was 5 people ahead of her. I mean, you could just feel it and sense it, that she was just chomping at the bit to get to us and talk to us. So she comes in, and she's so excited about telling us about this single airman initiative that she was involved in, where basically she's young female, single, on her second assignment, talking about the challenges of fitting in. Kind of getting to a new place, moving all the time, didn't have all her friends. She's a command post controller, and she was kind of struggling in this idea of fitting in. And so she ended up getting connected with this single airman initiative, going out and doing some hikes and things like that, connecting with other airmen, creating this friendship and bond with people that didn't work with her in her work center specifically, but were fellow airmen and were living the same type of lifestyle that she was living. So it was really powerful about how exciting that was for her, but was most exciting about what she wanted to tell us. So that you would think that is good, right? And that is good. This initiative is doing exactly what we hoped it would do. What was most exciting about it is she didn't find that. What was most exciting is she wanted to talk about how her supervisor recognized that she was somewhat being withdrawn, somewhat kind of seemed isolated, and he was the one that took her over there and connected her with the program and said, hey, I think this will be a good thing for you. That's the essence of how we have to take care of each other. We've got a lot of good stuff out there. We've got a lot of great people out there, and there's a way for us to connect them. And that was just a great story. Again, she wasn't really excited about telling us about the fact that she made new friends and how she did it. What she was excited about was talking about her supervisor, recognizing that she needed some help to get connected into her Air Force in a different way, a more meaningful way. And that kind of goes to the resiliency of our force, right? It really goes to the essence of if we can create these relationships, takes you right back to the feedback that I talked about, built on respect, trust, how we care about each other. The boss talks about this all the time. You just can't care enough. But you got to know these folks. You got to know what they're going through to do it. And then that, over time, will build resiliency. And I could talk a lot about comprehensive airman fitness, but I think a lot of you have heard that. But that you can classify that as a program. But when you think about resiliency, it's not a program. It's the essence. It's that core strength that we all have to have. Our families have to have it for us to be able to serve. Here's a couple great airmen. So we talked about our air commandos. We talked about, the great sacrifice that they have paid. There is no career field in the United States Air Force that has paid a greater toll of our operations than our EOD men and women. None greater. And here's a couple of them right here. Tech Sergeant Cole Pasley and Senior Airman Mikey Burris. And I first told this story just after the beginning of the year when I went down to Atlanta and spoke with a group of over 700 civic folks from Georgia. And these are 2 Georgia boys in our Air Force. And, you hear their story, and I'll kind of tee it up for you. So really, it's Cole that tells the story. He's at the EOD schoolhouse right now. But he talks about how many of his teammates he's lost. And hard enough to lose maybe 1 airman that you're close to, right? Hard enough any day we lose 1 airman. But to lose 2, to lose 3, to be connected to each and every one of these brothers and sisters just that tight-knit is a pretty emotional thing, and it takes its toll on you, and it takes its toll on your family. So I'm going to let. So there was this epiphany in Cole's career in life that came about when he was deployed, kneeling over an IED, and all of this stuff that he'll talk a little bit about here in a minute came to light. Basically, his whole life in this moment comes to a point where he's like, why am I doing this? What does this all mean? He's got a wife, a young son. He's lost so many of his teammates. You know, Mikey and him became friends because they were Georgia, and Mikey's a Bulldog fan and Cole's Georgia Tech fan, so they had their little rivalry going, and they communicated on FaceTime a lot about that. Quite a bit, to be honest with you. And the night before Sierra Burris went out on a mission, he and Cole were going back and forth on Facebook. Cole hit the rack for the night. During that time frame, Mikey got called out to respond to an IED. Next morning, Cole gets up, gets on social media like a lot of our airmen do to check in, and there's just litany of folks passing on their condolences because Mikey was killed while he was out performing the mission that our Air Force needed him to perform. So let me let Cole tell you the rest of the story here.
From that point on, I kind of just threw myself completely into the EOD job. I ate EOD, I slept it, I breathed it. I went into work early, I stayed late, because I was bound in this Airmen, because I was going to do everything that I could because, for these guys. Which wasn't really the right answer, because I ended up inadvertently kind of sacrificing time with my family and my wife. But that's kind of how I handled it at that time. So I ended up deploying out of here, going back to Afghanistan, and that deployment would actually ultimately lead to my team. We got struck by an IED. Fortunately, it wasn't bad. There's definitely been way worse. We walked away. But it did get me thinking, why am I here? Why am I willing to sacrifice all this stuff? And I kind of went through a period of soul searching and talking to people. And I think I've got it figured out. It's still a work in progress. I don't claim to have all the answers, but now what motivates me is my family. My wife supports me, stands by me. She loves what I do as much as I love what I do, and I'm pretty fortunate to have that. So they're my number one motivation. Number two is Tom. Tom was my first experience actually losing somebody to combat that I knew. And I see Tom's wife and his 3 daughters on Facebook. I see his daughters going to prom. I see his daughters graduating high school. And I know that Tom can't be there for that. And that motivates me to be a better person for my family, to try to be there for my family and be available to my family. Mikey Burris, Mikey's Bulldogs beat my Yellow Jackets that year and the year after that, but not this year. This year we're going to wear out UGA pretty bad. I feel it, and it's coming. And to console Mikey for that, while I'm on my way to Arizona, I got to swing through Georgia and get my things that are in storage. I'm going to go down to his cemetery. And first and foremost, I'm going to tell him just how bad UGA still sucks. And then after that, I'm going to tell him how he still motivates me to try to be a better person. And I'm going to tell him just how cute his little daughter's growing up to be. And these are the guys that push me to be who I am. So the EOD Memorial is down at Florida at our EOD school. All our students walk past this every day. The names of the guys and girls that have been killed doing our job are on this wall. And my in-laws still live in the area, so I get to go visit it pretty often. And every time I go there, I'm reminded that every person on that wall gave everything they had and then some to do the job that we all love to do. And I go there and I'm reminded that mediocrity wasn't an option for those guys. And I kind of remind myself to make sure that it's not an option for me in my day-to-day. Am I always successful? No, but I do always try. So that's my story. That's the story of my friends. I hope that you guys can take something out of it, but this is what pushes me and motivates me. Thanks for listening.
So no doubt Cole is a resilient airman, but that can't just happen without us all coming together, strengthen our core as an Air Force family. I mean, it really can't. We're doing a lot as we move forward to kind of build that resiliency from the ground up. So what better place for us to look at this? General Rand and his team is working this hard, but we're just now have the first group of airmen in the BMT Capstone Week, which really takes our 8.5-week program, gets the efficiencies out of the proper scheduling, and we do all the same training we've always done with our airmen in expeditionary skills. And then we kind of, at the end of that, they become an airman after 7.5 weeks. That's a different epiphany that takes place. The minute we start calling you an airman, it is a different program than it is when you're a trainee. And we're going to set them down there for a week after that and let them kind of decompress from the fog of BMT, not that dissimilar to the fog of war. It is that rapid of a pace when you're down there. And it gives us an opportunity to let them take some time to reflect, for us to bring in some folks to help them build the resiliency skills that are absolutely going to be essential for them to be successful as airmen in our Air Force, to understand what they're part of, to really internalize those core values, to help them understand that character is important. And we're real excited about that, because we think if you start them off right, then the potential for success is greater and greater and greater, and it acknowledges in a different way who they are when we're bringing them in. So really excited about that. Really excited about that. So now we have to think about all of this and how we advance the force. So everything I kind of talked about really advances the force. Goes directly to what General Welch talked about when you think about innovation. So there's the innovation from our industry partners that is absolutely essential to keep us on the leading edge of whatever might be out there, whatever we might be able to leverage into the future to do what our nation and our partners around the world need us to do. But it's also about the innovation of our airmen, which is absolutely critical. Secretary James and our Vice Chief of Staff, General Spencer, have been big proponents of this, the kind of spokesperson to this, and Airmen Powered by Innovation has certainly been producing some great positive results for us. We have about 3,000 inputs to that right now that have the potential to save in excess of $35 million for the taxpayer. That is decision space for our country, decision space for our military, if we're able to produce that. So I think, we've always been a service of innovative airmen. I mean, I don't think there's a better example of it than what General Welch provided. But I think it's important that we really focus in on what he said, and it might have went by quick, and that is we can't afford at any level of our leadership to stifle our airmen. We have to be prepared with this generation of men and women that we are going and are handing this Air Force off to, is we have to enable them. We have to empower them in the right ways. We have to leverage things that they bring to the table that, to be honest, when we were at their point in our careers, we couldn't even comprehend. They're just that smart, and they're not constrained by decades of doing something. They're unconstrained in those thoughts, and I think it's important that we understand that. So let me have Master Sergeant Shane Sneary just kind of give you a snippet of this. It's not always about the millions of dollars, but it is about innovation and having leadership that supports you.
My name is Master Sergeant Shane Sneary. I work in the Air Force Repair Enhancement Program here at Nellis Air Force Base. My job is to help the flight line fulfill its mission by supplying repaired aircraft parts, and then by saving the Air Force money and generating money for our maintenance group. A few years ago, some versions of the F-16 went through a modification on their oxygen system for the ejection seats, and this created a new requirement for a 5-year test on the oxygen bottles. And most Air Force bases don't have the capabilities to perform this test. So I found a company locally here in Las Vegas that can do this test for us, which is considerably cheaper than the alternative of buying a brand new bottle. My idea has the potential to save a few $100,000 every 5 years for the Air Force. The Air Force as itself changes every day. And because of the results of that change, we have to improve and change our processes to make sure that we can fulfill our missions. The airmen on the ground that are performing the mission day in and day out, they're the ones that have to adapt to the change, and because they're adapting to the change, they can change the processes to make things better. I think the Airmen Powered by Innovation program is a great program that provides the opportunity for every airman at every level to submit their ideas. And I think it's important because my idea really was very small, even though now it has an effect on the entire Air Force. That just goes to show that any airman can submit a small idea and it can turn into something very big.
Again, I'm not really sure you can ever say it better than our airmen that are doing it every day. And that is a testament to our entire Air Force that takes place. We just have to continue to support that type of initiative. So advancing the force in innovation, also advancing the force in how we're doing stuff. So I talked a little bit about it, how we're overhauling our enlisted evaluation system, how we're talking differently about feedback, meaningful, purposeful feedback that is built on a relationship of respect and trust. The changes to the weighted airman promotion system. We had another great opportunity that I really think is a great example of advancing the force. So we were just out of Barksdale a few weeks ago, and we had the opportunity, great opportunity, Megan Morehouse and her young airman, Philip Scott. And this is another guy that was busting at the seams to tell us something when you got in front of him. I mean, he was just busting at the seams. He was, I can't believe he's not smiling now because he was smiling while he was talking to us. He had such a grin on his face. And what he told us about Megan that I thought was so uplifting and really gives you kind of some of your own motivation and inspiration from your airmen, which I think we always are fortunate to receive anytime we get to spend time around him, is he wanted me to know more than anything that Sergeant Morehouse was the absolute best supervisor on Barksdale Air Force Base, and those were his words. He wanted me to know that more than anything else. So that's easily said, right? A lot of people make great accolades, something like that, and you think, hey, it's the supervisor, and he's a smart man. He says she's great, and she's going to think nicely of him. So no dust on him either. He's got some of this figured out. Of course, I'm not sure. So then I said, well, okay, Airman Scott, why is she the best? I want to know why. What is she doing that makes her the best supervisor? And this is when you know she's doing it right. Because he said, because she sits down and she talks to me. She knows me. She talks about what I need to do next and where I need to go. She asks me what I want to do. And he went through this whole litany of this relationship where it was no question that she was connected with Airman Scott. And he felt that connection and valued that connection. And he realized he'd be successful as an airman because he had Megan, because he had Sergeant Morehouse. So I think that's really a great example of what we can do, what we are doing, and what we will continue to do in the future as we have these discussions, as we continue to evolve as an Air Force. So we'll evolve with technology. We'll continue to work with our partners. We'll leverage them into the future. And we will evolve the way we develop our people and advance the force and how we care and strengthen our Corps. There's just no question about it. It's always good to go back to the beginning for us. So, our first Chief Master Sergeant Air Force, Chief Airy, I had the distinct honor and privilege of meeting him several times throughout my career before he passed. And he made a comment just really shortly before he passed about our Air Force, because, again, you have this, pioneer in our Air Force, pioneer in our enlisted force for sure. And we asked him about, how he saw the enlisted force then, at this stage versus when he first came in. And he was very open and candid about the Air Force he came into as a very amateur force, uneducated, basically just here to do whatever task that was necessary to do. But this was his quote, that they made this decision along the way, and they started to lead people, not drive them. And it was a decided change. It wasn't something that just happened. It was a decided change that slowly but surely has evolved. And he was extremely proud of his Air Force and his enlisted force, extremely proud of it. And we stand on his shoulders, just like we stand on all the shoulders of those giants that came before us. But let's be clear, we stand on their shoulders, not their shadow, not in their shadow. We are the force we are today because they put us on the platform by which we could see how far we could go, and we do that today. We will rely on industry for many things. We will rely on the American people's support of our airmen and their families. But make no mistake about it, the critical link will always be our airmen supported by their families. That will never be a question in anybody's mind. And again, I appreciate your support, Secretary James, General Mrs. Welsh, your continued commitment to just that priority. We have to do all the things you have to do to be capable. But if you leave those people behind in any part of that equation, you lose. And those people that are trying to learn about our business understand that. That's why they're trying to learn about a business from us. So again, it's been a distinct honor to continue to serve as the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. It's been a great, challenging year. The challenges ahead, but we'll get through them just because of those stories that we're able to tell, just because of those inputs that the Chief provided. So again, I look forward to the rest of AFA, although I'm going to jump on a plane here in a couple hours to go spend some time with some other airmen up at Langley. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, Chief Cody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks. Appreciate you.
I don't know if this... We have a little bit of time for some questions, so if you have some time, okay.
And the A-team's right there, so I'm covered.
And I don't know if I have any coming up, so I'll ask the first one. Oh, here we are. All right.
Awesome.
I was prepared, but I'm going to have to get my glasses.
I'm with you. Well, if you hold it a little further away, I might be able to read it from
Yeah,
here.
my arms aren't long enough. The future of military life cycle training as it relates to OSD and TVPO mission, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff Integration Office. I'm.
It's a prelude to something that sounds really hard.
All right. Let's do this. With the adoption of a
But I'm telling you, General Wolfenberger was here. I was ready to redirect. If you're talking life cycle management stuff and things, I was prepared to say we had an expert.
With the smaller force, what are the ways we can ensure education and training still remains effective?
Yeah, so we get this a lot. The Chief gets it a lot. I'm sure the Secretary does. I think our airmen have to kind of, just like the boss kind of talked about, you need to relax just a little bit about some of the discussion. Just a little bit. I understand why it's concerning. It's concerning to us anytime anything about a benefit or an entitlement comes up for discussion. But after doing this for 30 years, and the Chief's been doing it longer, we've been talking about this stuff that entire journey. I mean, these discussions are not necessarily new, certainly decisions. But there is such a strong commitment within your Air Force and within the Department of Defense for educating and providing an opportunity for the force to be educated that I think it's the last thing you have to worry about, to be honest with you. That doesn't mean it won't adjust and change, but there's $135 million in our budget this year to pay for tuition assistance. That is not an insignificant, commitment by your Air Force to ensure you do that. We are the only service that has the community college of the Air Force. That means all of our training and our PME is accredited. That costs us millions of dollars every year to do that because we have that kind of commitment. And we're not having any discussions within the Air Force of taking that away. We've made the tweaks to it that we had to make it a sustainable program, so that $135 million we believe will cover it as long as we get it. And if there's anything that will reassure you more than anything, we went into sequestration and they cut the budget, and 2 days later they passed a resolution that said we would pay for tuition assistance. So if there's any doubt you can't believe what we're telling you about the fact that we're committed to it, you have the support of our civilian elected leadership that says it's an important benefit to you, and they're not going to let us walk away from it. So I think we should be comfortable about that. We understand the value of educating our airmen. We absolutely support that because we understand how we leverage that into the future. That creates capability. But it has to be reasonable and sustainable, and those are the right type of discussions to have.
Chief, there's been a lot of discussion about the rising cost of pay and benefits relative to the total budget and that sort of thing. The Congressional Commission just released their report. Where do you see that going, and how would you think we ought to deal with that?
Yeah. So we've got to be a little tenuous here because we're in the process of going through what we in the department will provide back to the President that will then go to Congress. So the Commission's report is what it is. It's a Commission's report. There's been lots of those before about a lot of different things, so you can get worked up about them and maybe have due cause or not. I mean, I would suggest that you just take the time to really read it, because if you just read what other people are saying about it, you might be missing a lot of what is being said in there. I mean, to be honest with you, it's a large report. There's a lot more people talking about it than have read it. There's a lot more people that have taken the opinions of what other people have said. So I'm just being candid and honest with you about that. So we're trying to figure out a lot of it ourselves. What does that mean to us? And we have working groups within OSD where all the services are being represented to kind of try to figure out what that means to us. Is it a good thing? Is it not a good thing? Do we concur with all the assumptions? If there are assumptions, does the data make sense to us? We have all had the opportunity to report to that commission and give our views and opinions on things and what we thought that would impact. I just sat down with our great 12 Outstanding Airmen of the Year that are right out here in front of us and talked about that this morning with them. I asked them to kind of, hey, what are you thinking? What's your vibe on this? What do you think? It's their Air Force. I mean, they're going to walk away with it into the future. And I think we should just kind of take it in that approach. I think we should do the review that we're doing. I think we should do the analysis we're doing. And then if we really think it's going to have a detrimental effect on those that are currently serving, those that might serve, those that have already served, I think we'll have an opportunity to articulate that in the appropriate way, either be through what we provide to the President, or when we get all called to testify about it, because we will. I mean, there's no way we're going to walk away from this. It's not going to just happen tomorrow. So I think that's what I would suggest to our airmen. Look at it for what it is and don't necessarily have just the visceral reaction that we usually do when anything talks about change, when it comes to money or benefits or anything like that. There's some things in there that I'll be honest with you, could be a really good thing for a lot of people. Could be a really good thing for a lot of people. Just when you think about the retirement alone, right? Just hypothetically. 17 to 20% of the people ever serve long enough to retire. That means 80% to 83 get nothing. But a nice going away, maybe some separation pay if they serve long enough, right? So when we get worked up about a benefit that Ari's saying after 2 years you could walk away with something, give you some financial security, and we say that's going to be detrimental to the future of the force, who are we protecting? Who are we saying that for? And to be honest, Commission will tell you straight up, doesn't affect anybody in this room that's wearing a uniform. It doesn't affect anybody that's serving in the military today, but somehow we're having this visceral reaction. I think we just need to do the analysis that we have the right people doing it, figure out what we think that really means to us. Sound fair?
Chief, one more, and then
sure, please.
As a person who had to go through this as a commander once, how are we doing on working on the suicide issue with both the airmen and their families?
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. You get asked a lot of times what keeps you up at night. Boss gets asked this question. I get asked this question. And I always started out like this. I have never once, one day that I've been in this position, worried about the mission getting done. Never. I've seen too many airmen watch too many people get it done. There's just no question in my mind. Every single day, our airmen are going to get the job done. Sometimes at a cost that I think is too great, but they're going to get it done. What I worry about every night is that email that will come in at 1 o'clock in the morning, that notification where we've lost an airman. And it could be because of suicide. It could be because of combat. It could be because of domestic violence. It could be because of a lot of different things and behaviors that exist within our family that are just tearing us apart. So I worry about this, and I know we're trying hard. It goes to strengthening the core. It goes to the resiliency. It goes to how we care about each other and know each other. I cannot stand here and say we will ever accept one loss. You can't ever accept it because then you're just waiting for it to happen and moving on to the next thing. We can do better. We have to do better. That doesn't mean we're not working it. That doesn't mean we have been, failing to recognize there's a challenge here. But we can do better and have to do better. Somehow we have to be stronger so we don't have folks that get to a point where they are so desperate that they don't know that we're right here for them and will help them through these difficult challenges in life. So that has to be, a charge for each and every one of us in this room. It can't be me, it can't be the chief, it can't be the secretary. It has to be every single one of us looking out for every single one of us. And if we're better at that, we'll get better at this.
Thank you a lot, Chief Cody. We appreciate your time.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks again. Thanks, man.
Thanks again.
With the headlines, I'm Staff Sergeant Renee Carberry. The Air Force has released the 9th volume of Portraits in Courage, highlighting 24 airmen who've exemplified honor, valor, devotion, and selfless sacrifice in the face of extreme danger. To see their stories and hear more about these American heroes, be sure to visit af.mil. If you think this year's winter has been rough, imagine surviving Arctic temperatures while training in Alaska. Well, that's just what the team from Airmen did for the release of the February issue. Check it out and get some insane survival techniques when you visit Airmen online at facebook.com/Airmen Magazine. And senior airman Terrence Ruffin made headlines this week, becoming the youngest professional bodybuilder on the International Federation of Bodybuilding and Fitness Circuit. Ruffin says the achievement is a dream come true. Congratulations to you, Airman Ruffin. And that does it for the headlines. I'm Staff Sergeant Renee Carberry.
Hello, I'm Tech Sergeant Nicholas Kurtz, and welcome to Air Force Television's continuing live coverage of the Air Force Association's Air Warfare Symposium live from Orlando, Florida. Well, we just saw the end of Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force James Cody's stage presentation, The Enlisted Perspective. And you know, he spent quite a bit of time talking about the importance of resiliency. It's that mental, social, spiritual, and emotional wellness that today's airmen need to have to kind of roll with the punches and persevere in today's Air Force. And you know, Air Force TV recently had a team just before the holidays back down here in Florida at Tyndall Air Force Base covering the F-22 mission there. And I got to tell you, we ran into an airman there with such an incredible story of resiliency. I mean, he really was the most resilient guy I think I've ever met. His name was Captain Robert Hansen, and just telling us the adversity that he went through to achieve his dream of becoming a fighter pilot was just unreal. And we've got that story for you now here. Take a look.
I wanted to be a fighter pilot since I was a real little kid. I remember building models of F-16s and going to see air shows with the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds, and I thought it was the coolest thing. My parents were both in aviation. My dad was a pilot. My mom was an air traffic controller. Brother, he's a pilot right now, and so aviation was always in the blood, but my path of life just took me a little bit different direction. I went to college and decided I wanted to be a cop, and then decided I wanted to go to law school, so I went to law school. And then at some point I wanted to serve, so I applied to be a JAG for the Air Force, and I got a summer internship out at Mountain Home Air Force Base, and watching F-15s fly by every single day. It rekindled the fire to try to be a fighter pilot, so I went back that summer and threw my name in the hat for officer training school, and ultimately got picked up and got lucky with getting assigned to fighter. Here I am. Typical pilot training is a year. It took me 15 months longer than a year. Had a little medical hiccup in between T6s and T38s. I didn't think there was anything wrong, to be quite honest. I had one small lump on my neck, and Robin's parents are in the medical field. Her dad's a doctor and mom's a nurse, and they both took a look at the lump and they said, hey, you should probably get it checked out. And
this was after I had said it like 3 times.
True,
I'm just saying.
true. Yeah. After the T6 phase was complete, I went and saw a doctor, and they sent me to a specialist who took some biopsies of the lump itself. And ultimately, it was inconclusive until I'd started T38, and I got right into the T38 training, about to solo the jet. And the news finally came back that it was cancer.
It was a struggle for me to watch him deal with not knowing where he stood with the Air Force. He wanted to be a pilot. That was his dream. That's what he wanted to do, and now it wasn't necessarily in the cards. And that was really hard for him to watch that slip away, because you would see in his eyes it just wasn't, he just didn't know. And not knowing is the hardest part sometimes.
As soon as the news dropped that I was diagnosed with cancer, the commander at that time, Lieutenant Colonel Moon, saw me into his office and said, hey, your primary job at this point is just to get healthy. He's like, I don't even want to see you until you are healthy and all the treatments are done. There was a regulation that said that I was supposed to be disenrolled after 6 months of being off of flying status, and they said, hey, we're going to submit a waiver for this guy to get him back into pilot training, and we're not going to disenroll him until we hear back on that waiver. And that was a huge blessing for me too. So I had 15 months worth of time to wait for the waiver where I could continue to study, and they continued to give me jobs and make sure that I was gainfully employed with the Air Force, so that I could indeed get reinstated into pilot training.
It's been an emotional roller coaster in some ways. Really high, like high highs with the You know, he almost got to solo the T-38 before he was diagnosed, and then he was diagnosed, so low. Then he beat the cancer, and then we didn't know if he was going to get back in, and that would have broken his heart, which would have broken my heart, and then he got back in, and then, you know, here we are. About to get really, really high again.
That assignment night was pretty cool too when
really
we finally,
emotional.
just the moment when it was finally my turn to get my assignment, and I'm in front of this big crowd and a little bit anxious and excited. And the moment was finally about to arrive, and the senior national representative gets to announce what aircraft I get, and so. It was an amazing moment. I think until the next morning when I saw the patch on my flight suit that they gave me on assignment night, I don't think it really quite set in that I was going to get a shot to fly the Raptor.
This is his, you know, his dream, and it's being realized. He gets to do what he wants to do, and I'm really proud of him for all the hard work he's put in.